Right, welcome back. We're now considering the draft Featherston master plan document. Do I have a move to receive the report? Thank you, Councillor Glenzo, second, Councillor Maynard. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Against, carried. Thank you. Moving on, so over to you, Russell, I think. Oh, and probably our colleagues online. Are we all online? You lost somebody.
Yes, I can see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Ray. Morning, Richard. Right,
Russell, could you move up the side so we can see your face when you're talking?
Yeah.
Move up the side next to Colin.
Yeah, then you can be closer to the line.
You can sit next to me.
You're a brave Samantha, that's the most.
Yeah.
Right, so, right, bit of half team and we're off, and I'll leave it with Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And good morning, councillors. So we changed to a new topic to present to you our foundation discussion document that we've been doing, which is a key component of the Featherston Master Plan work, which is the work being undertaken during this year for a result in the future of Featherston across 30 years. I just wanted to say there's been good work done today in terms of compiling the draft discussion document. Componentry that's been involved has been research and interface to build the foundation discussion document. Also, substantive body of engagement within the community and external agencies as we go about that interplay between hearing from the community and shaping up our options and discussion document as a whole. So what we're wanting from councillors today is as we look at components of the discussion document, particularly the options 1 and options 2, is to seek confirmation that we can take the document out for consultation, the formal consultation with the community as one of the first key steps in working towards the subsequent draft master plan and then the final master plan. I just check in with councillors here and remind them that we've done the previous workshop where we looked at the options, so there should be some familiarity in councillors' minds of work done today. So that's my simple little overview of where we're at. The only other point I would make, or a couple of points actually, in terms of the engagement componentry that's been involved with the good work being done by Ree and Richard and Kendall, has been through a period of 30th of March when we had a public meeting right through to now, and it includes small group, interface with small groups, Brooktown, Knitting Group, Five Trails Trust, etc. Fairview, DIA, as well as meetings with Wairarapa, Moana Trail in early June. Just in terms of setting things for councillors to think about, in terms of when we look at what the crux of the Featherston Master Plan and achieving a good outcome, is 3 challenges or opportunities inherent within it. Those are creating, and these topics have come up as we've done our work and also interface with the community, by creating a pleasant town centre along the main street, which also serves as a state highway. So we realise that's a key component that we're dealing with. Ensuring that there is capacity for growth with associated infrastructure as we respond to growth, and protecting what is valued, such as family living and lifestyle options, and enabling intensification and choice and change. So there's got to be a mix within our solution finding. So that's what I wanted to impart to you, and for wise use of time, we can go straight perhaps and straight to looking at options 1 and 2. That's what councillors are comfortable.
Can I just check, have you been online, can hear us all right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Roberts.
Thanks, Russell. Before we drill down a little bit more detail, I guess I want to firstly acknowledge the work that the team have done. I guess from day one, and I recall having discussions about our spatial plan back in my last term on council. So this has been an ongoing exercise now for the last three and a bit years, from my understanding of it. But also want to acknowledge the contribution from the Featherston community. And I know that it's been a discussion point within our community outside the formal discussions with the team as well. So I really want to raise that as we work our way through and drill down on a little bit more detail. So thank you, Russell. Thank you, Reid, and Richard, and the rest of the team.
Thank you for that.
Right, who's kicking off discussion at this stage?
So
I can.
Yeah, we're looking at this year's option 1 or 2, and then general overview. Thanks, Councillor Fox.
Cool, thank you. Fantastic report. I really enjoyed reading it. And I think what was one of the nicest things about it, and Councillor Olds has touched on it, is the lovely connection that Featherston have had into the work and into this document, which has been over a long period of time. So it was nice seeing it crystallised into this format. My question relates to a comment that was in option 2, where KiwiRail have talked about potential costs around if we were to move the railway station. That might be quite expensive. Did they give, I'm not saying we're going to do that or we're not, but did they give any indicator of what kind of cost that might be like, and whether that would be something that they would pick up or we'd have to pick up as a community?
If I could answer that, no, they didn't give us an indication of cost, but what they did indicate was, it could involve aspects such as land purchase costs. I think one of the critical things about Featherston, based on the economic review that was done by Mike Cullen, is what is going to actually drive and inspire intensification. And there is now the opportunity that Featherston has been earmarked as a complex development opportunity to work with government. And I think that's what Mike Cullen says in his report, that it's really only an organisation such as Kāinga Ora that will be able to assist in making that drive. So I think that perhaps as a discussion, councillor, that comes subsequently, if that option was chosen to go forward with, in terms of, the parties and the respective responsibilities.
That's cool. That's really good advice. Thanks, Ray. That's what I wanted to understand. Fantastic.
Mayor Alex.
Yeah, and possibly I could comment on that as well, Ray and Rebecca, is the whole point of the Wellington Regional Growth Framework and the Leadership Committee is to allow those conversations with KiwiRail and the Ministry of Transport to occur. And I also commend you on looking at options that to be honest, would not have occurred to me, to look at a really long-term solution or enhancement of Featherston. I wouldn't have thought about moving the train station. I wouldn't have thought about moving the town, but it's great that we put these options up, because under that framework, nothing's off the table if the government says, yes, you are achieving that growth node round a transport node, and achieving the required number of additional affordable housing units to the community. So, yeah.
Councillor Plummer.
I would like to commend Russell and your team and Ray. I think you've done a great job here, but I think the elephant in the room is still State Highway 2. And you've heard me speak on it before, and I'm going to say it again. Until we're talking a 30-year plan here. We're not talking 5 or 10 years, but 30 years. We need an indication from Waka Kotahi what their plan for State Highway 2 is. And if the population of Featherston is economically going to grow, potentially double in 30 years, if this growth hub becomes a fruition, building everything around State Highway 2 with it going through the centre of town is not an option. And so until we actually get some indication from Waka Kotahi what is their 30-year plan for State Highway 2, I think I can't support this going forward.
All I can really add, councillor, is that Waka Kotahi have been involved in the design charrettes to date. So they have, in a way, provided their perspectives in terms of state highway through this process. I think the other element in terms of a bypass is that in Mike Cullen's report, it talks about the importance of the movement network to urban commerce and to retailing. And that is one of the reasons that he doesn't believe that, for example, option 3 of moving the town centre to the rail station will actually work. And he referenced some work by Tim Stoner, who's from Space Syntax, who's done a lot of international modelling about the importance of movement to commerce. So that's why we've landed where we have. And there is the opportunity, of course, through this process, if the council is approved, to go to informal consultation for the community to raise that issue again and for it to be put back on the table for submissions.
So there's no exclusion of a consideration of State Highway 2 at the stage if this document goes forward.
Well, it's not an option that we have put forward for the reasons that I've just outlined.
Yeah.
I respect that it's been raised. It's not something that Waka Kotahi had put on the table through the design charrette. So just in terms of responding to Councillor Plimmer, they did raise that matter with us during that time.
Okay.
I think if I could just perhaps come in on that issue, we all know of examples internationally where moving, creating a bypass has actually had a negative impact on a town centre. And I suppose the obvious one is that you see on all the, on TV and movies all the time is the impact of Route 6, the impact on Route 66 and the towns along there of the new freeways going in. But I can think of lots of examples of places I've lived and worked in the UK where unless a town is incredibly vibrant and has something very strong and important that drags people there, a bypass can have quite a negative impact upon the economic viability of that town centre. But I think the other thing is that I think we've mentioned before at the workshops that Waka Kotahi are very much looking at the function of their routes, whether they have a place function or just a movement function. And in areas that have a place-based function like this as well, they are very much more open, I think, now to looking at environmental improvements and the ability to cross the streets and whatever than they were, even 2 or 3 years ago. So I think that's a discussion with Waka Kotahi, which we expect to continue after this public consultation process has gone through, because we need to then start to think about, well, what are we proposing for the town centre? Thank you.
And actually, Richard, if I could just add there is now a One Network framework, and it is a national framework, and it is a framework whereby transport and Waka Kotahi have to actually balance place and movement. And I think one of the critical issues here, and we've actually raised that, is how do we make the town centre and the main street attractive while still accepting that there will be heavy trucks and other things. So how do we slow movement, allow for better pedestrian safety and attractiveness? And yes, I agree with what Richard was saying. Waka Kotahi are now looking at what are, working with parties about, how to work together to deliver on multiple objectives under that one national framework.
Yes, madam.
Thank you for that clarification, Ray. And I just want to reiterate what some of my fellow councillors have said. I think this document, we tasked you at the last workshop. We said that we wanted something that offered the options to be able to go out to our public residents in Featherston to be able to have a look at and to get that, that consultation started. And you've really provided that. So, I just wanted to also state my thanks to all the hard work that you've done, along with all of our amazing team at the council and the work that they've put in. So really, really appreciate everything here. And I agree with Councillor Fox in that it really is, it does make good reading, and I think the way that it's written, it will engage with the people of Featherston. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I just would acknowledge Kendall Harper as well from the council, because she's been part of the team. She's unable to be here today because she's on leave, but she's undertaken a lot of the consultation with the local community through the Brooktown Byron House, etc. So it's been fabulous to be working, you know, so much with you as a team with the council.
So, you know, while I don't want to, I understand where Alice is coming from, and I think the stance he was taking may just stop any progress on this, as opposed to, is there a way of incorporating the question of a heavy traffic route into the consultation for the public to then direct into TA on how they want them to be looking at the future? Because I am also mindful of the incompatibility of increasing heavy traffic and logging through an urban environment. So can we do something there?
Perhaps through the chair. Harry, would you like to comment on that, just in light of, you know, your experience working with NZTA in the past? What's your views?
It's not a matter of NZTA putting a line on a map. In fact, that's they can't do that. When the NZTA is contemplating a diversion of the state highway, it involves a designation process. And one of the things that happens with the designation process is it triggers, if you designate an area, it's a long thing to do, it requires a lot of consultation and cost, but it also triggers a thing called hardship. So it means that people have a property in the designated area, it obligates NZTA to purchase the property. And so it triggers a range of costs. Of course, any purchase of properties that comes from the same bucket as the building of roads. So this is why NZTA do not go into this area lightly. The main trigger that relates to a heavy to an alternative route is the volume of vehicles, VKT, and the percentage of heavy vehicles usually. That usually sits somewhere between 25 to 30,000 vehicles a day, and it usually involves about 20% of the flow of vehicles being heavy vehicles. The State Highway 2 is so far away from that figure that the likelihood of a bypass being considered by NZTA based on need, other than we would like it to happen, puts it so far down the planning category that it's unlikely to occur for at least 20 years. That aside, one of the things in the RMA reform is called the Regional Spatial Planning Act. And so part of the intent of that, that part of the legislation is to find a mechanism where they are able to provide indications of future transport corridors that doesn't require a designation process as part of the nature of the reform to provide an indication. So there is another mechanism, but look, the chances of that, so the Act will be enacted, but the mechanism, the actual regional, if you like, wanted to spatial plan, it drills down to reasonably significant transport corridors and things 10 years away.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Yeah, so one of the things I'm concerned about is that given there's been no real signal from NZTA in terms of deviating State Highway 2 or a heavy traffic bypass, I wouldn't like to see it be incorporated into this document. I mean, as a discussion, as a main discussion, because it'll take the thrust away from all the other elements, for instance, within the document that are really, really critical to our community. And I wouldn't like the focus just being on realigning or taking State Highway 2 out of the centre of the town. So I think that would be a discussion that if a signal in 10 years' time from NZTA, then maybe it's an element that could be reintroduced into the concept plans in the future. But that's 10 years out, as Harry's alluded to. Otherwise, it's going to become a focal point of discussion, and I don't think that would serve our community well at all. So, my thoughts.
Councillor Blimmer.
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, and Harry, you hit the nail on the head. And Colin, this is a 30-year document. I'm not suggesting that they designate a new route now. What I'm suggesting is that there needs to be something in the document that says when traffic gets to, there needs to be a conversation about the future of the road, whether that's some milestones that need to be met, or if like you said, Harry, if it's 20,000 vehicles, I don't know what the figure is, but if it's in the document, people will understand that yes, it is part of the planning process that we're going to undertake. In this document at the moment, there's nothing about that. And that's my concern, is how do you make a decision about a future of something for 30 years when one of the key indications about what could possibly happen, or what are some trigger points in that 30 years, is missing? And if we put that in it, then I'm happy.
We could include an airport and things like that as well. I mean, that's the thing.
Councillor West.
My question is around, have we actually gone to the businesses and found out, hands down, how they feel about having their shops on the main road?
Well, that's the next part.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's when we're going to go out to.
That's in the consultation.
So until we actually get that feedback, we can't actually, I'm not discounting what Councillor Plimmer is saying, but then we can actually start factoring that in at that stage. Factoring it in now without actually finding those details of how the businesses feel about being on the main road is a bit counteractive for the want of word.
I can tell you from 6 years of being at Greytown School that the biggest comment that we got from people was about the safety of kids crossing State Highway 2. That hasn't changed. In fact, the number of vehicles has increased since I left Greytown School, and that's not going to go away. And I'm not saying move the road. I'm saying give an indication of what the future thoughts will be, or what the triggers are that would make Waka Kotahi, or what Waka Kotahi's triggers are, so that there is a conversation that can be had. But at the moment, if it's not there, you can't talk about it.
But you're adding a Greytown element into a Featherston solution.
It's the same argument. The road goes through all towns.
Yes, it does.
Not Martinborough.
With the exception of Martinborough.
So can I just make a suggestion? Why don't we include a paragraph that actually explains that we have not taken into account an alternative diversion of State Highway 2 for the following reasons. First, because I think Alice's point as well, we should mention that actually, if people say, well, why don't you do this? So just add a paragraph explains that we do not put this in, and part of the reasoning is that the triggers that would warrant an investment for Waka Kotahi is X and Y.
Yeah.
And then just a paragraph from Waka Kotahi that can explain that. Yeah. And then it makes it clear to people why we have not taken that into account, because we've made it clear. It's a simple paragraph to discussion document, but that does it. Alistair, would that resolve your concerns?
Does that satisfy you, Alistair? Yes, that's a positive. It's a positive.
Yeah. Did you get the thumbs up?
You did. In terms of moving the station, is there any feeling about that, or once again, we want to hear what the people
I think so. I think it needs to go out. Let's get this document moved to the next stage. Yeah. So that way we can hear from everybody.
Russell, do you need any more guidance at this stage?
I thought we should perhaps use our time and look at options 1 and 2, so you can visual appreciation.
They're in the document, right? Yeah, I mean, I think I've had a pretty good look at them, and I'm quite comfortable, but I think with what we've spoken about today, that those amendments which we talk about on recommendation 2, if they go on, I'm more than happy to move the recommendation 2. But if anyone else wants to talk, but for me, I feel like we should. I'm more than happy to move we approve the Featherston Master Plan Foundation discussion document, July 2022 for informal public consultation subject to any amendments.
I'm happy to go that way. Russell, do you want to, because I think it's a long debate.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going back to the, so move on to seconder,
Yeah. Second, all those-
Cromwell's seconding, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Carried, thank you very much.
Well done, Tim. It's good.
Sorry, just one question, what is the timescale of this?
So do you want to comment on that, Ray?
I couldn't quite hear the question. Was that
Oh,
about?
What's the timescale on this, Ray? How much
Oh,
time have you got?
We've allowed 1 week for us to make any changes that you've just identified today, and then we'll be going for public consultation. We've been working with Catherine and the communications team, so she's already developed a flyer, got a survey organised that can go on the web, and if you look at the very last page of the foundation document, you'll see a timeline there as well. So I'm just flicking down to it right now. So the feedback will close on Friday, the 19th of August. Then that will be reviewed and reported back to yourselves in September, with the preferred concept option then being able to be adopted. And then we'll follow that with detailed master planning work, report that to you in November, then go out to formal consultation so that you can have hearings in March next year.
Okay.
Thank you, that's great.
And the only other clarifying point is that at this point, we've got 9 questions for the community to reflect on.
Yes.
Includes the nature of vision, social infrastructure, design guides, etc. And what they think about option 1, option 2, and other considerations.
Perfect.
Right, thank you, Tim. Thank you very much, Ray, Richard, Russell. We'll move on to item B2. This is the Water Service Safety proposed submission. So this is a submission on the Tuesday. Do we have a move to receive the report? Councillor Guenzo, Councillor Fox, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Right.
So, first of all, I'd just like to really acknowledge the work that Amanda has done, and with Robin. Thank you, Robin. Hit the ground running. Take 2 and you're already getting value. It's just absolutely fantastic. Pulling this together, it's a difficult thing to write. We've had some useful comments from Alistair so far. So I'll just open it for Amanda. Is there any points you would like to raise? And then I'll just open it for questions.
Just the process, I guess, that I use is probably worth noting. So we had the meeting on Monday, the workshop on Monday, where you kind of told me all your thinking, and we heard quite a good discussion for those that participated. I took those notes. I took a number of already submissions from other councils, and I kind of collated the themes that you'd mentioned and kind of edited down, grouped them up into what I thought I'd heard from you. So, and then I passed it on to Robin, Stefan and Harry. Robin was able to give me some really good feedback because of her knowledge of the work. So that strengthened it quite a lot. And then it went out to you very late last night. I apologise it was so late, but it's quite a lot of work to write.
It was still quite early enough for us to be able to read it, right? Yeah, so thank you.
So yeah, so that's just the process that I've been through to get to where we've got. And I know there's been a few comments. Alistair's made some suggested edits. I don't know what you want to do from I put a recommended resolution in there about how the decision from here to get to assigned submission to go on Friday. And I suggested it go to Assets and Services. Pam kindly pointed out to me we don't have a deputy. I just cut and paste that from another resolution from another council. So apologies, we don't have a deputy of Assets and Services. But you can, it's up to you guys to choose how we do from here to get the final copy. That was just a suggested resolution.
Thank you, Matt. Comments at the stage? Has everybody got a copy of Mr. comments?
Yeah, that was just wrong. You know, you put them first up and
They came-
then already started the
Actually,
meeting.
didn't have the list, so-
All right,
Yeah,
okay.
you just, you know.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you. I was going to ask, has everybody had time to read the submission, or do they, because of the time that it came in last night, does anyone need any additional time to read it now?
There was a lot of information to take in for myself personally, but I mean, I still was quite blown away by the amount of like work that Amanda and Robin have been able to put into it, and I'm just having a look at Alistair's points now, but I mean, I don't think we've had enough time to be able to actually put anything our own things in there anyway, but
I guess that's what now's about. At least, Amanda, we did get the chance to review it last night, and I appreciated the opportunity to do that. Alistair's obviously proposed some amendments. I have come back and said there are some things in there that I've got some concerns over, which I don't know if the rest of my council colleagues have had the chance to look at my email in response to that last night, just around a collective position of council on the Three Waters reform and the nature of the elements in our submission. I'll just leave it at that, and then we can come to some of those other points around the content of the submission and then the agreed recommendations at a later point potentially.
Councillor Oles and Councillor Maynard.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, and I've had a look at Alistair's and also Rebecca's comments on that. I did state on our workshop the other night that we were probably never going to achieve consensus from council on certainly a specific global view from council, and that from my reading of Amanda's submission, it's covered off in a lot of those areas where there was questions to be answered, and it's not clear from my observations. It's not clear about things like costs, how it's going to have an impact on our rural communities. Those sorts of things are still unanswered questions. So we've pretty much covered it off. From my thoughts is that we pretty much covered off on some of those questions with the document that has been presented to us today. So that's my thoughts.
Councillor Maynard.
I just wanted to, Rebecca, I haven't received your comments.
Oh,
So
that's strange.
No, Alistair hadn't realised he hadn't sent his one out to everybody. So if you just replied to him and to the others that may have been missed out, the rest of the councillors. So that'd be, I'd love to see it.
Okay. Well, my comments were basically in the nature of, was there an opportunity for us to gain some consensus on, just looking at my sent items from last night, was there the opportunity to gain consensus around, I guess, a general platform? My concern is that I think the submission is a wee bit vanilla. That was my words. And I just wanted to see whether or not, I'm just trying to find my email, I'm sorry, Pip. It was last night and it was late and now I can't see it.
I've got it, Rebecca.
You've got it? Do you want to forward it on, please? Sorry.
Let me double check.
I'm working on one machine and about 3 windows at the moment and I can't find it. It would have been about 9:30 last night, maybe even later. Yep.
I got it last night.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying in our submission is we can't receive, sorry, it's unlikely that we're going to achieve consensus when there is so much uncertainty with particular things like you just raised, Colin, and that's completely right. But for some of the things that have been well described and for those things that we know already, such as the process that is being used, and it's more the process that is being used where I think probably as a council we could achieve certainty. It's the way in which government have, I'm going to use the word negotiated, and then decided to compulsorily acquire a community asset. I think we can probably reach agreement around the table about a council view on that. But the other things where we've been seeking detail and seeking clarification, probably not, because everyone's confused in that space. That's more, I think, where you know, my comments were heading in that space.
Councillor Alex, sorry, Mayor Alex.
Did you just call me Councillor Bain?
He did.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ems. Look, you know, I don't think we're ever going to keep consensus to try and find. However, don't forget that you are not precluded as an individual from submitting to the government exactly the same as councillors if you want to strengthen a response. I'm fading fast here. However, I'm going to request that there's one thing that we have missed out, is that there be a request for the government to reassess the model that has been picked. Now, as councillors and CEOs, we have been presented with a variety of different models apart from the Scottish Water model, and at least one of them is far superior, according to all the mayors in LGNZ and rural and provincial that I have talked to. So I'd really like us to also include in the submission that a revisiting of the most applicable models to our situation should be made. And apart from that, you know, any radical ones, go ahead and submit. I also want to note that this submission needs to be in by 4 p.m. on the 20th, and it needs to be delivered in person. So we need to note that in our resolution.
Can I make another?
I went to the website last night, Mayor Alex, and it looked like it was an online submission.
It is. Yeah, you can deliver in person or as an online submission. That's the only method.
Up till midnight on, I think it was, on the 22nd.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I had thought I'd heard that they were stopping online submissions due to the volume through lobbying groups, but I may be wrong.
I'll double check.
You know, actually, if that's the case, that's actually really, really bad, because that shows that democracy is being considerably undermined if the government decide they're going to do that.
It's only a comment, so it's not fact.
Oh, yeah. Actually, well, Alex, the thing is, I appreciate what you're just saying there, but the government actually made a decision not to receive other forms of submission. They only allowed 2 forms of submission on a very, very important piece of work, and you know that is not democratic. This whole process has been undemocratic.
And I think that's sitting with the Ombudsman at the moment on a lawsuit regarding process taken.
Wow. Well, let's be interested to see where that goes, won't it? Because many of those other things haven't gone particularly far. Anyway, it would be nice if we could actually put that in our submission if it does go down that path.
Question to the team. Are we looking at a unanimous sign off on this?
I'd like a full council sign off on it. Well, actually, we might struggle with Lee. That's the only thing.
Alistair, Councillor Plymouth, hands up.
Yeah, look, I put those those edit recommendations through because those are some of the issues. Look, Amanda, I think you did a great job putting it together to start with. I think you know, so as some of you have already mentioned, and Colin, you know, talking about the questions about rural, questions about how do we get our voice heard as a small council when there's only 6 or 7 seats. So I've tried to incorporate those into them. So I'd be really interested in some feedback from you guys about my changes. I put the issue in there about mana whenua representation, because we talked about whether this is the right place for it or whether it should be an entity. And I'm not trying to say they've got it wrong, but what we're trying to present is an alternative view as to where these things can come. And we also spoke about, if you remember, we spoke about the requirements that are in the legislation about the ability or the prerequisites for council appointments needing to be professionals in water and so on and so forth. But there was nothing about the mana whenua appointees on there. So, trying to say, if you're going to have it for one side, you've got to have it for another side. And I'm not talking sides, I'm just talking about representation here and the requirements about that if they're going to go down this track. You all know I don't approve of the process being followed. Like Rebecca, I think it's fundamentally undemocratic. But I've tried to, with my edits in there, just to add in some of the things that I thought that Amanda might have not intentionally missed out, but just to add a little bit of oomph to it.
Clarity.
And I'd really like to get some feedback, whether you think these are the right way, these are the right comments, and whether or not that reflects what we talked about in the workshop.
May I just the only thing that I'm concerned about is what work has the council done in engaging directly with Mana Whenua to make calls on how they feel about the strain that it's putting on them. So I don't know if that's actually the right sentence, if you like, or there's the right wording on there. That we should be saying, that with the other things that are going on with health and, and where Mana Whenua, when we're talking about the Mana Whenua from the South Wairarapa areas, I'm not quite sure we should be saying that unless we can ensure that we have had significant engagement with them, and that's coming from them. And I haven't heard that from Mana Whenua here in the South Wairarapa, and I'm just wondering if it's right to put that in when in fact, due to the short amount of time that we have to do this, I haven't heard that from Mana Whenua.
I think that's the point that Alistair's actually making in some respects. Maybe there's been some individual conversations which have helped inform that comment, and maybe it's not a broad Mana Whenua statement, more it's an individual thing, but we do know from the conversations that we've had with individuals that they are struggling if they are representatives in that Mana Whenua group, because they're being consulted by so many, or consulted for so many reviews at the moment, and they're overwhelmed and can't meet timeframes themselves. Is there some way that we can construct a statement of that nature? Pip, with that, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right.
Yeah.
And we haven't got the time any more than we've got the time.
Can you give me a little bit of time, and I'll have a look at that and just see if there's any other wording, perhaps Narita, and possibly Violet as well, because Violet's right in the middle of everything.
Yeah, spot on, Pip. Spot on, because I think the thing is, no one wants to be overwhelmed in this space any more than they already are feeling overwhelmed. Yeah.
Could we run our statement past the chair to gather comment?
Yeah, I think we can, but like I say, I'd like to involve Violet because of not just her where she sits with iwi, but actually with Kohenui. She is our Kohenui representative, who is our Mana Whenua that looks after Lake Wairarapa. So everything about having her involved, I think is really important. So,
and I think she's just been appointed chair of
co-chair. Yeah, co-chair. So talking about people who have a lot of strain on their resources.
Councillors, if you could excuse me, I'm just going to have to leave now, but I think the content's done, and I'll hold with whatever decision you make. So,
yeah.
Thanks,
thank you, guys.
Thanks, Alex. See you.
So do we want to go back to another draft?
So, yeah, I'm just,
What's the next move from here?
Sorry, guys, we do need to be able to sign off a submission. Okay. So you'll have a submission on the table. And so we've got to find a way that, because otherwise we're to formally sign off and present another draft, we have to come back to another extraordinary meeting to make it, so we don't want to do that. So we've got to find, so what I'm going to suggest is that we actually go through the paragraphs, and you tell us if you're satisfied with the general direction other than some minor edits. And I think we can pick up Rebecca's point, because there's a number of these where you could say, yes, this is a united view, or it is a some councillors kind of comment. That way, we can reduce Rebecca's concerns, but it means that we've got some certainty in what we want us to include. And then, so then I propose that we have a resolution that you essentially delegate to us to include the changes you have suggested into the document and we forward it. How's that sound?
So the only concern I have is that we actually won't see a draft document, or a document prior to it being submitted in full.
So we can circulate now, you can just come back to us with edits.
Yeah,
We need
so-
a resolution. If you want this to be in the public arena as council's submission, then we need to do that. Otherwise, we have to come back with another extraordinary meeting.
Can I make another suggestion, Harry?
Sure.
So,
Sure.
Alistair?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, look, I'm very happy to table my edits and then go through that, because that adds a bit more oomph to what Amanda's done. Otherwise, we might be going round and round in circles. And I've, like I said, I just asked for your comments on my edits there. I didn't receive anything negative, or nobody came up with anything negative, but and I've tried to be very clear in what was discussed. So, right, because I think it's a bit more of a fuller paper than perhaps Amanda's put out there. And that might give us a little bit more of a steer about where we're going.
Councillor West?
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with what Alistair was saying. However, we can't actually put commentary in there about mana whenua when we haven't actually asked them about their points of view. So I'd really like to get some feedback from what Pip has to say and what she's found out. We can't put that.
I didn't put any comments in about mana whenua. I talked about.
But no. But the document contains references to mana whenua, and we have not even consulted with them. They weren't even at the workshop.
Yeah, look, I'm very happy for Pip to go out and do that myself. But again, I'd rather, if we're going to do this, if I table my document so it's in the public arena and then go through it in that way, because it adds a bit more. It's a bit more fuller and encapsulating some of those things that Amanda missed out on. In terms of rural, in terms of how our council might be represented, and those sorts of things.
Yep. Amanda's done an absolutely amazing job. But yeah, we just have to be very careful in how we actually word this. If we're purporting to speak on behalf of mana whenua, we better damn well have ticked that box or at least consulted with them.
I've got Councillor Glenzo and then Councillor Fox.
I was going to ask, because we're having this roundtable discussion on this, can we ask Robin and the officers to come up to the table so that if we ask them a question, we're not sort of turning over our shoulders to ask that. And I'd be very interested in, the comment was made that we need to perhaps take a stronger stance. And I was interested in whether Robin thought we should emphasise something in this. I know you've had some input with Amanda on this, but is there anything that you feel that we, or officers feel that we need to make stronger in this to get our point across? And I think also if we submit this, then we need to be prepared to stand up and talk to our submission, because if they get that opportunity to do that, I think that adds a lot of weight. We know that for us as a council, that adds weight if people come and talk to what they're submitting about or what they're talking about. I think that, but I'm not sure what the legalities of having officers at the table, apart from those talking about the documents, is.
No, look, it's very common for a chief executive or a senior officer to talk to a select committee on behalf of an organisation.
Councillor Fox?
Could we potentially use Alistair's document as a platform to go through paragraph by paragraph, notwithstanding Pip, you're going to go back and chat with Violet and Nerida, which I absolutely support. If they are able to meet the deadline that we need to meet by getting in this in on the 20th, then I think we're okay to work to that 20th deadline. We would be. They're going to.
I'm just nervous that it won't pass through here. It won't pass through council.
Can I trigger? What I'm suggesting is we start with the base document, and we're going to go paragraph by paragraph through it. Alistair can then tell you what his suggested changes are in the paragraph.
These are quite significant.
Yeah.
Because they're on top.
It's significant. It's not just a few words, it's whole sentences.
Exactly.
We need to work on this because it's got Amanda's in there
Has everyone read Alistair's document with edits? That's the first question.
Just kind of going through now.
Okay, cool. Well, do we have a 5-minute, just sit quietly around the table and read Alistair's document then? Cool, let's do that.
The 5 minutes. Yeah. So sorry to interrupt, but we need to actually sign some document today. We're not going to be able to reach, we don't meet the time frame to submit.
So we're just